Meeting for September 18th to order. I'll do a quick walk through the agenda and then we'll dive in. So first we will start with public comment. We actually have members of the public here. I see a hand raised. I know there's at least one more as well. So we'll do that shortly. We have a consent agenda that we'll go through and one warrant report that we have already passed around and signed up here. We have reports from our Director of Finance and Operations, Superintendent, and then some brief liaison subcommittee reports as well. We then move into personnel and welcome and meet some of our new leadership who are here in the meeting with us, and some will be joining virtually as well, some of which are already on the Zoom. After their introductions and our conversations, of which we've asked the named people to do 3 to 5 minutes, but we also want to meet all the new assistant principals as well, and we're looking forward to that. And then we'll have other conversations, questions about entry plans and things as part of that process. After they're done, we'll move on to old business. We have the final discussion and approval of the 2023 to 2026 District Strategic Improvement Plan. I added the word improvement because technically we have to approve the district improvement plan, so this is it. That has been out there since June, so there's been plenty of time for the public to comment, contribute, etc., and we've appreciated all their feedback. We'll then move on to a discussion around focus indicators for superintendent goals, which I missed in our last meeting, but we can talk about here today, and then finalize and approve the focus indicators and the superintendent's goals for the meeting as well. At that point, we will hit the end of the meeting. So might be quick, might be long. We get to meet a bunch of people. We're excited. With that said, we'll go to public comment. And Maria, and I know Chris has something as well. So Maria, your hand was up, so jump right in. And if you don't mind, actually, come down and pretend you're Sean Brandt so you're on the video as well and people can hear from you. If you don't want to do that, that's fine too, but if you look comfortable enough.
Okay, hi, I'm Maria Morgan. So I'm one of the board members of the Reading Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and so I'm representing the board tonight. In June, we came and presented to you, and one of the messages that we gave was that we feel like we have a really active CPAC, and it's just been growing and really gaining momentum, and we have excellent collaboration and partnership with student services, with Jen and Allison. And one thing I expressed is I wanted to see like some more intentional support and engagement and partnership and promotion from across the departments. And so there have been some really awesome, there have been some really awesome things that have happened, and I wanted to publicly acknowledge them before we lose track of them. So first, one thing that happened over the summer, we were invited, the CPAC board was invited to speak to principals and assistant principals and team chairs and to share about high expectations and inclusivity and partnering with parents, which was just so awesome to be able to, have that voice as the leaders were developing their professional development for the year. So that was terrific. And then principals and directors have reached out to us to meet with us. We have a meeting on Wednesday with Lindsay, right? Yeah, hi. We have a meeting on Wednesday with Lindsay, and other people have asked, proactively asked for information to put into their newsletters, and we had such a busy start to the year. We're not usually so busy with 2 speakers in September, so to have other people, reaching out to us is just awesome to know that, if we got too busy, it was still on other people's minds. The leaders also responded to a survey that we sent out about what the best way would be to share our updates and to have them included in newsletters, because we don't want to give anybody headaches. We just want to make sure that this information gets out to all parents. So that was awesome that they partnered with us in that way. And then also, very cool. The Math Pathways Committee, the first meeting, introductory meeting for it, was scheduled at the same time as a CPAC presentation that we had with Sarah Ward, which I don't know that I would have recognized that until right before, and that could have been a source of disappointment. But proactively, Central Office Administration reached out to us and said, hey, there's this thing happening. These 2 things are happening at the same time, but we've we're going to make sure both things are recorded, like all parents are going to have access to both things. And to know that it doesn't fall on CPAC to make sure, the CPAC board to make sure that all parents have access to all the things is fantastic. And we were super, like, that was the biggest thing. I wanted to come and make sure I highlighted that because I think that is just fantastic. And then, so that was, last week I decided I would come, but then also this week we made a video to introduce CPAC to all parents, because really all people in Reading need to know what CPAC is, because really everyone is a member of CPAC. The leaders have been super enthusiastic about sharing that video with everybody. Some of them have shared it during the back to school night that happened and are planning on sharing it at back to school nights, which is just fantastic. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from parents who have seen it. Like, people have stopped me and been like, that was so great. It was concise. I really know what CPAC is now. And my hope is that people can see, like, you might not even realize that you need CPAC, but maybe 6 months from now you will, or a year from now you will, or tomorrow you will. And to know that that's there is just fantastic. And, we're working really, really hard, and we just want to make sure that it's utilized by everybody. And then as a parent, I need to share this. So that was all from the CPAC board, but I just have to share my own experience at Wood End. Nicole Schwartz took time, and she showed it during the back to school night that we had this week. Hold on one second, honey. So I was in a room of parents at Wood End, and Nicole took a moment to talk about special education and 504 plans, and she introduced the team chair, and she gave heartfelt encouragement to parents to reach out to either of them and or to CPAC, and she spoke with sincere pride about the relationship that Reading Public Schools strives to have with families in special education, and how she felt and hoped that that was especially true at Wood End, to which I responded with applause that others joined in on. And I've been to a lot of curriculum nights, and nothing like that has ever happened. Special education tended to feel like something you didn't talk about unless you had to. By contrast, the result for me at parents at the back to school night, curriculum night, was this huge sense of belonging. Not just for me now, but also for the me from years ago who quietly had children with disabilities that, some of the disabilities were known, and at the time some of them were unknown, but I didn't know at that time how folks would respond to that. But at the back to school night, it felt like any parent in that room with a child with a disability or a suspected disability would have been given the confidence to know that their child will be accepted and welcomed exactly as they are, and that their partnership as parents was invited and encouraged, and that they would have support and company. And I also, just coincidentally, that afternoon before back to school night, I saw this meme and I shared it on our Facebook page, but it says, diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. And that night, and this year really, with all these things I'm mentioning, I truly feel that CPAC's voice is heard by people across the district, and but it's the whole board. We're just super, super grateful for that. And it's not just the board, because it's all parents. CPAC is not the board. CPAC are the collection of parents. So we want to publicly acknowledge all these wonderful things, and we thank you. And that's it.
Thank you, Maria.
Can I ask a question?
No, you may not. Okay, let's go. Okay, say bye and say thank you.
Mr. Haley, Chris, if you wouldn't mind coming up as well.
Oh, of course. Should we point out how awkward this is right now or no?
We get you on camera, so it makes it easier for other people.
I'm here to, Chris Haley, Tennyson Road. I'm here to update the school committee on the weather. It is still raining. Just like it was at the street fair last weekend, and with the school committee's help, as well as my colleagues on the select board, we were able to raise $1,052 for the Reading Rotary and Autumn Hendrickson. So I'd just like to thank, Carla Tom, Jessica Callanan, interim principal, Rochelle Robino, the Parker principal, and then also, last time I said that the biggest draw, I forget which principal it was, but this time around, instead of the biggest draw, it was the biggest help, and that was Jess Terrio. She stayed for 2.5 hours, and, everyone was just signed up for a half hour, but she got hundreds of balls, and it was extremely a big help by her doing that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I just, thank you all for for stepping up again, and, next year, hopefully it won't rain, but if it does, it'll still go on.
You'll be wet anyway, right? Chris, thank you for organizing it.
Thank you.
It's great to hear.
These chairs are comfortable, I could get used to that.
Is there anybody else with public comment? Okay, we will move on in our agenda then. And let's start with the consent agenda, and Aaron will start with the motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? No? Okay, well, before we approve, just let everybody know, and that some of the school committee members saw, with our policy change over the summer, we are now sending thank you letters to people who provide these donations, which you see 4 of them in the packet as it is. So I signed 3 of them, so we're missing one, but I'll get that one figured out with Olivia. But it's great that we're actually acknowledging publicly and thanking them publicly as well. So with that said, all in favor of the consent agenda? All opposed? And it passes 4-0. So we move forward. Okay. So we're on to reports. And with that, I am going to move to Dr. Pinto. You're up first.
You know what, I do not have a report to offer this evening.
Okay.
I prepped for the personnel section.
Okay, we'll get you there then.
Entry plan review.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay.
So, Dr. Milczewski.
Great. Just like to thank CPAC too. I just think that was a really nice acknowledgement of some of the good work happening, but I also just want to acknowledge that CPAC's leadership in our community too, how they communicate, how they collaborate, how they advocate, I think is really a model for so many in our community, and I just appreciate how they go about their work. So we truly appreciate the partnership as our central office team and our school leaders, and just thank them for all that they're doing for our community, for our students. My only quick update tonight is around Math Pathways. So we've been keeping the community updated on our Math Pathways work ahead over the next couple of months. Tonight we launched our first official meeting. We had about 20 members made up of community members and also leaders across our community, teachers, principals, central office staff, to launch the work, which will happen prior to each school committee meeting over the next couple of weeks, and then culminate with us presenting at the 11:30 school committee meeting of just our plan to move forward. Also like to acknowledge that we were overwhelmed by the response in the community to join the committee. I think there's a lot of people who want to step up as a result of their lived experience, as a result of just their work and their expertise, or for another, just passion for the work. Unfortunately, we couldn't have everyone who volunteered to step up in the committee to join just because of the size, but just we can tell, as the committee has shared, that this is a, kind of an issue or a challenge or dilemma that is that so many are invested in, and we look forward to, as a committee, really making some headway and moving this forward for our students. So thank you to all those who stepped up and volunteered, and we look forward to keeping the community posted over the next several months. One related note, we are going to make, as a result of feedback from the committee, I'm going to make just a website or a page on our website that just is dedicated to pathways to keep the community updated on what's happening during these meetings, and things like that as well too. Other than that, no updates, but we're very thankful the weather has cooled off this week and our buildings are just at a better temperature for learning. So thank you again for everyone for hanging in there during the really difficult time over the last week.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to liaison. We'll start with Carla.
Just an update on the Killam Building Committee, that the request for services bid proposal went out last Wednesday, and we should get bids back on the 11th.
Okay,
And we're looking forward to presenting to the MSBA.
great. Chuck?
No report.
Aaron?
Just 2 quick mentions. Speaking of CPAC, they are sponsoring Lynn Lyons tomorrow night. That is going to be hosted at Parker. Originally, it was going to be in here, so, but that, because there was so much interest, the CPAC arranged to have a bigger venue. So that's at 5 o'clock at Parker. She's excellent. If you or anyone in your family is dealing with anxiety, I highly recommend you go. And PAIR is having their first meeting on Wednesday at 6 o'clock.
Okay. The only update I have really is, the schools got a little bit of a spotlight shined on them by Senator Jason Lewis at this select board meeting last week, specifically highlighting the early elementary related work that, literacy work that we've been doing, and how he looked at us a little bit as a model within his district and what's happening here. So I know we did have a few of us were able to sit down and talk to him earlier, but it was great that he publicly acknowledged where Reading is and leading some of that work. So Dr. Milczewski and staff, I just want to thank you continually for the work you're doing. And those of you that are out there, right? Some of you were on that committee when we started it, and the work is still happening in your building. So thank you all for that and the involvement therein. Okay, so with that said, we'll move on to the personnel side and the leadership introductions and entry plans. And Dr. Milczewski, I'll turn over to you.
Great. Well, it's nice to have so many of our new leaders here with us tonight, both remotely and in person. I'm just going to start with just two quick comments, and I think I've shared these time and time again. The committee's probably sick of me sharing this. The first one is just that like good leadership really matters, and I think that when you look at just research around what is it that's going to move schools and move student outcomes forward, is the most important factor is the quality of leadership. So all of those who are with us tonight for joining us, we're just excited about you stepping into the role and the impact that you're going to make in our community, and we're thrilled about the hires that we've had over the past couple months. The second comment I'd like to make is just that leadership is extremely complex, and many in education would say it's never been more challenging. And I would just like to acknowledge and thank all of you for stepping up in service of students and for our staff and for our community to be leaders when a time where it is really difficult to lead, and appreciate you all stepping up and putting yourself out there for our kids. So tonight, how we're going to handle this, we're going to first welcome and introduce the 4 staff members who we have required to create formalized entry plans, 2 which are published and forward-facing entry plans for the community, 2 leaders for which I'll get to the circumstances in a minute. We're required to create entry plans, but those were sort of just kept between myself and our team and the leaders. And also then like to introduce the rest of the other leaders across our district who did not create formal entry plans, but are holding critical leadership roles in our district too. I'm going to pause after the first kind of few, after each one, and allow the committee to ask any questions that's on your mind. I did ask each of these first 4 leaders just to speak for no more than 3 minutes and to keep it very informal. They would probably wanted to prepare slides and work through it. And we said, tonight is a good time, just kind of an informal chance to get to know a little bit about how they're approaching their entry and some of the things they've learned about the school community thus far. So Carrie, I see Carrie's online at home. For those who don't know Carrie Wilcox, our new RISE director. Carrie was previously a pre-K director in Billerica and has over 20 years of teaching experience as a pre-K special ed teacher. So welcome, Carrie, and feel free to jump right on.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Tom, for the welcome. And thanks for the invitation to come and talk a little bit about RISE and the way that I've been approaching my entry to the program when I joined and got on board in July. So it's been I think suffice to say, it's always busy at a program like RISE in the summer, but being a new leader to RISE, it was especially busy for me, really working alongside with extended year program and extended day, and really kind of jumping in and trying to get to know some of our families and students, but also just really trying to learn the ins and outs about RISE and about Reading and the things that the community values about the program. So it's been a really great few months of really learning, and a big part of that has been listening and trying to get to know all of the different members of the RISE community, staff, families, students, the community as a whole. I've been trying to reach out to all of those community members and really just listen to what they value about RISE, what they, think has been some of the brightest spots about RISE and things that they hope and dream for RISE. And as we sort of move forward, the program recently had a program review, which we have been really picking apart and looking closely at. And I know Dr. King last year put a lot of the components of that program review in place, and really looking at the impact of those things and how we can move those things forward, and just getting a feel for what's important about RISE in Reading. And what I am so thrilled to say is that it's so clear that the things that I value as somebody who's been in early childhood special education for longer than I would like to admit, that the values that are held in Reading and at RISE are so similar to the values that I hold personally and professionally. So we're really just still working at building relationships and learning about the community and the program and how to have that path forward with the program review and building on the hopes and excitement about Rise for the future. So it's kind of what we've been up to, what I've been up to this summer. I'd love to take your questions if you have any.
Questions on the committee? I'll ask one, Carrie. You can't get away without asking at least one question, right? How have you been able to navigate the multi-location element of Rise and work with your principal peers as well as the families that are not at the central location here at the high school?
Sure. That's a great question, and it's a challenge. I mean, I think it's, I haven't developed yet my superhuman ability to be at 3 places at once, but I'm really trying, and maybe by January I'll have an update on that. But I really am just trying to connect with all of the community members. Firstly, trying to work with Nicole and Lindsay as the building leaders in the other 2 locations, and making sure that I am letting them know about the priorities of Rise and things that are going on day to day, and vice versa, and staying connected to families, all families, as much as I possibly can. Where it's great in 2023 to have the means to reach out to families in ways that go beyond being in person, but inviting, them to connect in whatever way works for them, in person or not. And I've tried to keep staff also feeling as a cohesive team, and it is a challenge, but it's really kind of amazing to see how they are a team, and they do exist as a program, even with the challenges of 3 programs.
Great, thank you. Okay. Thanks, Carrie.
Welcome. Thank you.
Next, we'd like to invite Lindsay. Lindsay Fulton is new principal at Killam. Lindsay came to us as most recently principal in Drake at a 540 student elementary school. Was prior to that assistant principal in Drake and also taught in both Stoneham and Lowell. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you.
And both Lindsay's plan and Carrie's plan are printed in the packet.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so I feel like when you first start the entry plan too, it feels like there's a lot to it, and you always wonder if you're going to get through it all, but it was really nice to kind of take a few minutes this weekend to review what's already been done at Killam. Really, in that phase 1 part was about relationship building, getting to know staff, families, the building itself, and I feel like we've been very successful. And I say we because Talia Hallett, my assistant principal, I couldn't do this entry plan without, so I appreciate all your help. So a few things we did in August that I really do think have had a big impact. We've done 20-minute listening sessions, or sometimes a little bit longer, with different staff members. We also met with quite a few different stakeholders, and with the Killam Building Project, it's been nice to get to know a lot of different town members as well. We also had the popsicle party in August. Sorry, I feel like I ran up here.
Take a deep breath, you're good.
And I have to credit the other principals as well, because we've met, I can't even tell you how many times, to just align things throughout the elementary schools and make sure that we're on the same page for different things moving forward. So really, that relationship building piece has been phase 1, and we continue to do that with different events. Back to school night was great last week. We also felt like we touched on special ed pieces of it, and we're really getting to know families that we've been emailing with or connecting with over the last few weeks. So that's really the first part. I feel really good about the first part. And then the second part, which is really now through the end of October, I feel like have been really organically happening without me even looking back at this every week. So some of the things that we said we would do is have a beginning of the year assembly where we'd revisit values. We had a great time doing that 2 Fridays ago. We also have had lunch with a lot of students, and that's the only time I'm forcing myself to eat, so it's fit perfectly into the daily schedule, and then we get to know kids, not only their names, but what they like, and then reconnect in the classroom so that we really can build rapport with them. We're really also looking to see the positions we have within the school. So for example, the METCO coordinator, school adjustment counselor. So officially, as of today, they have groups that are up and running to support the school psychologist and kind of provide an additional tier 2 support, making sure we're really making the staffing and roles productive within the building. And that's something we'll be continuing, and we want to communicate with families about what that looks like for tier 2 supports in the building. I've gotten some good feedback on weekly communication methods with the newsletter, including lunch, small things that go, pretty far for families to make sure that they know what's going on for the week ahead. And then I think kind of the long-range plan is to start looking at some of the data for Killam. So MCAS results, assessment data, looking at the curriculum, and seeing how we can help not only students but teachers with their professional learning on that piece. And I think that piece is already happening in some of our team meetings, but really digging more into it in the winter once we've have the relationships, have the logistics and managerial piece of the building under control. Any questions?
Looking at the committee, questions? All right, I have a question again, just,
Sure.
again, you can't get off of at least one question. And this might be for you and Dr. Milczewski. How have you been able to jump in to ARC in particular? You're quote unquote a year behind the rest of the principals, so you're jumping in, trying to figure it out as you go. I don't know if we had a special plan to get you engaged and whatnot, but, and how's that been so far?
So Lindsay Kay, not me, is our coach for ARC, and Talia and I have already met with her and talked with her over the last month to kind of figure out what we need to do. She has shown us School Pace and some of the technology tools with it, as well as my reading specialist, Allison Matthews, has been helping us kind of learn a little bit. I definitely think that, so tomorrow she's at Killam all day, and she's modeling the assessment and then a couple different lesson practices with our K through 2, and our 4th grade staff, as 4th grade is a large new group. So we're going to see that tomorrow, so I think that will help. And we've also had the opportunity to meet with both, not only the math coaches, but also on literacy. We've met with Erin Birchill this week, last week, to talk about kind of what's the timeline for Killam, what do we need to learn. So I think that will continue to evolve in the next month. I think getting into the classrooms for not only the formal evaluations, but just informally day-to-day, that's something that we want to do to see what illustrative math and ARC looks like in our building too. And I talk to the other principals and ask them questions far too much as well.
I don't think there's such a thing as far too much. Well, that's me, but I'm sure the other principals might have a different view, but I don't think so, knowing the group we have, so.
Principals, you're a principal?
I said the other principals that she referred to, not me. I'm definitely not a principal. Nowhere close.
The other thing I'll add, I think Lindsay did a really good job summarizing that. And something that I thought really resonated with the Killam staff during the interview process with Lindsay, which she shared during curriculum rollout in her previous schools, one thing she would always do is try to go in and teach a lesson or teach a series of lessons through the curriculum so she kind of see what it feels like. And when we were chatting the other day, she goes, I'm just frustrated I haven't been able to get to that sort of yet and to try it out. And I give yourself some grace. It's pretty early on, but I think also trying to really immerse yourself and getting there and giving it a shot, right, I think is something you've committed to as well. But I think all the support that you have from the coach, from the other principals, from the Killam staff, I think have just got you up to speed really quick.
And you came in late, right? You had a,
August 1st.
so you hit the ground running, Ruth, so. Thank you, Lindsay, very much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to shift to, so Lindsay and Carrie are both required to create the entry plans that are published in the packet. Also, our next two leaders did create entry plans that were kept more internally. The first is Jess Callahan, and the reason that the the entry plan is more internal is because the interim piece too. We know that folks in the community know Jess from her role last year as Director of Academic Achievement, and also knowing it's interim, we felt it made sense to focus her energy and attention on sort of getting things up to speed right away. But did want to give Jess the chance to come forward and to share a little bit about how she's approaching her entry. If you're not familiar with Jess, I think we've introduced her a couple of times. Her career and started as actually as a captain in the U.S. Army, was a high school history teacher, spent 6 years as an assistant principal in Salem, and also 6 years as a principal as well. So I think, Jess, this is officially her 7th year as a high school principal too, so obviously someone really experienced jumping into the role. So, but Jess, come on up, and we'd love to hear a little bit of how you're approaching your entry.
Thank you, Dr. Milichewski. That was a great intro. From here forward, you can introduce me.
I have a lot more great things to say, but I'm trying to keep moving forward.
Thank you for having me this evening. I know that we've met many times, sometimes more formally at school committee and on several other committees. So I'm going to try to be as concise as possible and basically putting what I've learned so far and then where we're going at Reading Memorial High School. So what I've learned so far. The community of Reading is an amazing community. It's filled with much hope for me for the future. Staff is professional and deeply caring. Parents and families are committed to partnering with the school in our important work. The high school leadership team has many new faces and some more seasoned, and we are learning to work together effectively and with open and honest communication. Special thanks to the school committee and the district staff as my team and I work towards sustainable and consistent progress. Where are we going? My role is to move the school forward and pave the way for the next leader, but I also feel like I simply cannot be a placeholder because Reading deserves better. As such, where I'm focusing this year is to support my staff so they're free to do their best work for our kids, building better and transparent systems for communication, building strong and collaborative teams across the school, and putting in place protocols, updating policies, which many of you have worked with me on, and procedures ensuring alignment with the district. Implementing and following through with thoughtful professional learning and professional development plans at the department and school levels that align with the district's strategic plan and the needs of Reading Memorial High School at the same time. Picking up and moving forward the scheduling committee and continuing to work to expand our innovation career pathways. We have 2 pathways in advanced manufacturing and information. Over the summer, I applied for 2 more in clean energy, where we are one of 8 programs that were approved in the entire state, and public health and social assistance. We were approved to apply, so there's many, many steps for that, so we'll keep doing that. But we did get a $25,000 grant to prepare to apply for that. We are also going to continue to expand dual enrollment as part of Innovation Career Pathways, but also outside of Innovation Career Pathways. And we will receive and use the DESE and Department of Ed grants, the implementation grant of $75,000, which we recently found out we got. The second planning grant, the earmark funds of $25,000 for Nord keyboards in the music department. And we are still awaiting the $400,000 skills capital grant, but I am told by all the people I bother at the state level that it's coming. And that it's normal when we have a changeover in governor. So there's a lot of exciting things going on at the high school. My job is to work in service of the community and the school committee, and definitely the students, parents, and staff. And so that's where we are. I've had the luxury of being there a year, so I knew where I wanted to start on July 1st. And that's it for the moment, but I have questions. I know that there'll be at least one.
There you go. Chuck, go ahead.
Thanks, Jess. So you touched on that you're continuing your other role, I guess, not your former role. Your
Correct,
other
yeah.
role. How are you balancing that? Do you need help?
I have, Dr. Milichewski did add a 3rd assistant principal, and so like I said, I'm really developing my team at the high school. The 3 assistant principals plus the athletic director, who also serves as an assistant principal, are working very, very hard to make sure that they can kind of plug those holes and fill the gaps where need be. It is challenging, but I think that it's important, and I do have experience under my belt, so it's not a complete uphill climb. And so I feel like we can rally the team to move forward as we need to.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or statements?
I'll make a statement.
Go for it.
This is essentially speaking as a parent, but the improvement in communication to families has been dramatic and greatly appreciated. And a lot of families have remarked upon it to me as well, but I've noticed it. So like your newsletters and what you put in the emails, we just really appreciate the outreach to families.
Thank you.
That's what I was trying to lay you up for, so we're good. All right. Jess, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Very much appreciate it.
Have a great night.
And Tom?
Great. And next up, Dr. Derek Pinto. So those of you who haven't met Dr. Pinto, who's been on board for almost 2 months now with us. Derek has his doctorate in educational leadership. He started his career in education as a teacher, was a principal, then a CFO in California. Has worked at the community college level, and then most recently was also the vice president of finance and admin at LaSalle University. So Derek, welcome. And then also on the piece, we didn't have Derek complete a formalized entry plan for the community, as we felt that a lot of the tasks that Derek were completing were things that sort of were within the purview of administration overseeing. And I think a lot of the forward-facing piece of Derek's role, the community understands, they expect him to manage the budget effectively, manage the operations in an effective way, and I think a lot of the more detailed, granular pieces are ones that were, that our team had a close look on when he turned that into us. So I'd love to turn it over to Derek to see how he's approaching his entry and just some initial thoughts.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Dr. Milchevsky. Appreciate it. So good evening, all. As you're aware, I've been asked to hold it to 3 minutes and talk a little bit about what I've learned and my approach and the things that I'm focusing on. So I'm going to do my best to do that. So the early stages, my pre-entry, of course, was focused on researching the job, the district, the town, the community, taking a preliminary look at the budget documents, enrollment projections, strategic plans, et cetera. I'm now, as was mentioned, closing out my second month here. So I'm really in a listening and learning phase. I'm working on relationship building and data gathering. So I'm getting to know the personnel that are in my department and district personnel, and trying to figure out how best to leverage our strengths and what opportunities there are for growth. So I've also gotten to know the town personnel, so the town manager, the town accountant, the finance department, of course, the facilities department, that started to meet with people from the Department of Public Works and, of course, safety and law enforcement, so both police and fire services, or SROs at the sites, and then dove into meeting the community, so the school committee, of course, we've met a few times, and then the select board also, finance committee. And then I've started to attend some community functions. So I did go to the town cookout, which was excellent. And then I'm part of that Killam School Building, the Killam School Building meetings. So some of the things that I'm focusing on going forward are definitely a kind of an analysis and sharing of the data that I've been collecting. So I'm trying to look for trends, some data points which would serve to substantiate decision making that we're going forward, for the future direction of the district, and then doing some planning. So as part of that, trying to make sense of what I've uncovered, using the data to formulate some plans, future plans, and strategically moving my areas forward. So other things that I'm concentrating on are definitely developing those relationships with constituents that I've mentioned, and then the technical aspects of the job. So coming from California to Massachusetts, now I'm working on school finance in Massachusetts, and of course, Massachusetts laws surrounding finance, and then our own systems and processes. So everything from Munis to our IT and maintenance work tickets are all important. The areas under my purview, of course, the budget. So successfully leading the budget cycle for 2025 is important. Negotiations with all 5 bargaining units are underway. I'm doing a deep dive into budget documents and audit documents and trying to uncover opportunities to drive revenues and reduce expenses. With regard to facilities, I am working with town personnel, as I mentioned. We want our schools to continue to be clean and safe and attractive places for learning, not only for our constituents right now, but for future constituents as well. In food services, we're working to build on the successes of last year. So as you're aware, and in previous reports, I talked a little bit about some of the installs of new equipment that's happened. And then we do have turnover in personnel. So we're working to replace those personnel quickly. In IT, we also have personnel shortages. So we're working on addressing that, as well as the current configuration of the department, seeing what would best suit us moving forward. And then in transportation, as you're aware, or maybe aware, we're continuing to work with the transportation provider on providing safe, reliable, and efficient transportation for our students. So I have to tell you, quite honestly, I've found my early research to really be borne out. It really is a winning team. So our leadership is very enthusiastic, very focused, very collaborative, very supportive. And so I really just continue to be excited to be here. It's a pleasure to come on a daily basis. So I hope that people's patience won't wear thin, and that they'll continue to be supportive and patient and collaborative as I, kind of embrace the learning curve. And, I want you to be aware that I am working to justify the faith and trust that's been placed in me. I recognize the weight of the responsibility of the position, and so I'm looking to do that successfully and really add value to the district. So thanks for that.
Great, thank you, Derek.
Sure.
Any questions or statements, committee? Well, we got Lindsay, you want to?
I just want to shout out Derek, he's been riding the bus in the morning.
I'll repeat.
It's made a huge impact, so we appreciate you doing that.
I don't know if you heard that, Derek, did you hear it?
I did, Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay, for that. Yes, riding the buses, we have ridden them quite frequently, and credit also to Olivia Lejeune, who's been really spectacular and dogged in her determination to assist, to lead for sure, and assist and support in getting the correspondence right, the schedules right, the timing right. It really is, we really wanted to make sure we got it right in the early stages of the year. So that parents can feel confident sending their kids on the bus. Thanks for that.
You kind of beat me, that was going to be my question. I was going to lay that up, but it works, so good job. Okay, you get off the hook a little bit easy there, Derek, so it's good.
You know what? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No, if you want to add something, go ahead. You want to add something?
Well, I did want to say, I think the challenge that we face in the early going with regard to transportation is just that it changes on a daily basis. So I think that people we do have some constituents who are expecting a little bit more of a car service or an Uber service. And so we're working on addressing that, with them, right? There's a different volume of students that ride the bus on a daily basis. So the drop-offs and pickups are not always the same. And then, you've got the challenges of both traffic and weather patterns to compete with, but we are working on getting it right. It has improved over the last couple of weeks, and we expect it to get steadily better in the coming days.
Great, thank you, Derek.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Milczewski, back to you.
Yeah, so we have several leaders here amongst us that we would like to introduce that are holding a variety of roles. I would just like to quickly, I'll introduce all the leaders, and then if anyone who's here would like to share anything, they're welcome to. I didn't require you to say anything, but you're welcome to step up and share, and any questions to the committee as well, too. So I see online we have Lisa Azarito. Lisa can just wave. So Lisa comes to us most recently as the Humanities Coordinator in Wakefield K-4. Previously was a literacy coach, assistant to the principal, reading specialist, and over 10 years as a 3rd and 4th grade teacher as well. So welcome to Lisa.
Did you say what her role is?
Thank you. It's great to be here, everybody.
Lisa's the assistant principal at Birch. We also, another assistant principal, Jess Swindell. Jess. So Jess spent over 14 years as a 1st and 2nd grade teacher, and then most recently comes to us as an assistant principal in Danvers. Jumped in as the assistant principal at JE. Continuing on with assistant principals too, so Anne Marie Ring. So some of you may know Anne Marie as a parent in the community as well. Anne Marie spent the last 7 years as assistant principal in Winchester. Before that was both a math and ELA interventionist, a regular and special educator, and also over 25 years of teaching experience as well. Also continuing on with our assistant principals, new parents with us too, so Jess and Sean. So Jess, thanks for joining us tonight. This is Jess's first night out since having a baby, so what a date night.
Yeah, what a date night, exactly.
So Jess, most of the community know Jess for her amazing work at Wood End over the past 10 plus years in education teaching in RPS since 2017, and also has served as the AP previously at Wood End as well. So welcome to Jess in the new role as well. Thank you for enjoying date night with us too. And then last but not least, Assistant Principal Talia Hallett, who I know that Lindsay also gave a shout out to as well. Talia, over 12 years of teaching experience, has been at Birch, was previously at Birch since 2014, was teaching 1st grade, and also had been an assistant principal at Birch since 2018 too. So we are overall just thrilled with the quality of assistant principals stepping into those new roles. I think the staff would probably right away seen the value that not only that role can hold, but really awesome leaders in those roles has already had and will continue to have in the school community. So I just appreciate all of our new APs at the elementary jumping into those new roles and figuring out those new roles as we kind of build them over the year. I'd like to open it up either at this point to either any of the new assistant principals, anything that you'd like to share from the elementary level, or any questions from the committee at this level before we shift.
Carla?
I will say that I am thrilled, and I know we are thrilled to have APs in our schools. So we are really excited and really look forward to helping you and collaborating with you and watching your successes. So thank you.
Anybody want to add to that? Carla said it, you're good. You guys are going to rock, we're looking forward to it.
I'd also like to thank all those who've advocated for these roles long before I have too. I realize I kind of picked up the train late on this too, but Chuck, I know you've been here advocating for APs for a while. I know the rest of the community members too, principals have been advocating. So I'm glad that these roles were finally in the budget, and also just like to thank all those who kind of made this a reality way before I was here too. So thank you. We look forward to seeing your impact here. Shifting, we have 2 new assistant principals at the secondary level. So they get off without questions? Yes. Nice, all right. Getting soft as the presentation's going on, right? So,
I'll come up with them if you want me to.
so I'd like to introduce two new assistant principals at the secondary level. We'll start with Dr. Jill Story. Jill, this one for low. So Dr. Story holds a doctorate from Northeastern, came to us as an assistant principal in the Medford Public Schools, the Medford High, and previous to that was the Social Studies 7 to 12 department chair at Masco, and had over 15 years as a social studies teacher as well. Also like to introduce our other assistant principal at the high school, Meredith Flanagan, who just talked a little bit about that new role. Meredith comes to us from over 20 plus years in the social work field, was most recently a social worker here last year in the building, but prior to that she was the teen chair at Salem High School and was also a longtime school adjustment counselor. And many in our community have already come to learn that Meredith is fluent in both French and Spanish. So, fun fact there too. Nice. But I'll pause there to see if anyone, if either any comments from our new secondary APs or any good questions from the committee.
Looking around the table.
I'll just say it's great to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you this coming year. We've had a great start, and I'm super excited about the team that I'm working with. I couldn't ask for a better team, so.
Great, thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
Great. And on that note too, a couple people have already asked, so what is this, what happens with the interim role next year? What happens to the Director of Academic Achievement role? What happens to the interim? I just think those are conversations we'll probably have in another, month or 2 down the line. I think at this point, we're really just focused on trying to get this year underway in a successful way. That's plenty to keep on our plate for now. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce Mary Ann Lynn, who is a familiar face to many in the room too. So Mary Ann Lynn, who's been a long time and beloved teacher here and department chair in science. I'd like to say that Mary Ann right away has jumped into, I think, a couple of critical projects at a really important time in the department. Already started to help facilitate and lead our math pathways team. Has already started to help design our structure for what our math coach model is going to look like, and has already started to wrap her arms around what our science curriculum review cycle is going to look like as well. So this is not a year where someone stepping into that role right away is going to be able to kind of sit back. And Mary Ann has right away just jumped in too. So appreciate Mary Ann jumping into this new role after many successful years at RMHS. So I'll pause there to see, Mary Ann, if you had any comments, and anyone from the committee, any questions or thoughts.
Thank you, Tom. And I'm very excited to be in my new role and part of the learning and teaching team. I'm not going to lie, it was a little strange not being in the classroom after 28 years. But I am really excited to be in this role where hopefully I will be able to support teachers on a different level in helping their students to learn math and science.
Great. Any comments or questions from the committee? Thank you and welcome to the role.
Thank you.
Is there anyone I missed?
I don't see anybody else online that you missed.
And again, we'd just like to thank all of our new leaders for jumping right in already in the first couple of weeks too. We're thrilled you're here and looking forward to seeing following all of your successes and the way that will translate for our student outcomes. So thank you for jumping in. And we encourage you to go home. It's been a lot of long days lately too, so you're welcome to stay, but I think it's probably...
You can't make them end date night.
I know. Or go get a drink.
Yeah, you can sleep in the back row. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you those of you that are online as well. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Sean, for coming.
Okay. So with that said, we'll move on to item D1 in the agenda, and we're almost right on time. How about that?
Look at that.
7:50 to 7:51. We're keeping track. So this is the final discussion and approval of the 2023-2026 District Strategic Improvement Plan. And we'll start with a motion first, and then we'll open up for conversation, so.
Motion to approve the 2023 to 2026 District Strategic Improvement Plan.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Carla. Okay. So any further thoughts, questions, comments from anybody on the committee? No? Nothing? Okay, we'll keep it simple. Well, we've heard a lot, I think. We've talked about it a lot.
It's not like
So,
we
yeah,
haven't spent a lot of time talking
So
about this.
we have spent a lot of time talking about it. I'll just say this, I mean, I think, Dr. Milichewski, the work that was put into this by the staff, really, I mean, you were a huge part of it and kind of structuring it, but the teams, plural, did a great job in looking through it and taking feedback, and incorporating that feedback as much as possible. I will ask that we have a PDF version of everything as it is now created, because the links are great, but that can change tomorrow, and that's the beauty and the curse of a living document. So if we can get a PDF version of everything that is now and make that like front and center on the district webpage, that would be awesome. So people can go there and work it through. So if that means Olivia hopefully can adjust it so the links go to the next page instead of the website or something else along those lines, so it's all self-contained, that would be great. But again, I just want to thank everybody that was involved in that, both in the district and in some cases outside the district, that helped us to craft that. I know some of that is already, a lot of it's already in flight, almost all of it's already in flight. Anyway, just please pass on the thanks appropriately. Okay, with that said, and no further conversation, all in favor of approving the district strategic improvement plan? And all opposed? And it passes 4-0. Okay, so we'll now move on to the focus indicators for the superintendent goals. In the packet, I've put together a brief memo that outlined, basically tried to show where all the focus indicators were, versus what Dr. Milichewski and the goals are currently listing as. I've since amended that a little bit locally in my version, and after some conversations with Dr. Milichewski as well, we made some adjustments to some of the things. Minor. All the ones that I marked as question marks, he agreed we should add. So those are added in the goals. You should see them in red in the goals. Now, when I say he agreed we should add, it doesn't necessarily mean he agreed that those should be something that he's going to be scored on necessarily, but they're alignments, right? So this conversation is really for us to talk about how many of these standards and focus indicators do we think should be in his summative review in June of 2025. So we have 2 years, basically, of time. I'll also, go ahead, Chuck.
No, I was talking about, it's hard to read, so.
Yeah, I can actually, let me share this so it's easier to read. Hopefully it'll be easier if I share this screen. That way you can also see the adjustments I made.
That'd be great, because my computer just died.
Okay. So if I zoom in this a little bit, it should be better. But it might also be harder, so we'll see what I can do.
That looks good.
Get rid of some of the ribbons and make things. Yeah, anyway, we can work with this, but, so, yeah, as you can see, goal, student learning, district improvement, this is just an order of what the goal sheet says. I added these 2 columns, as we think through some things, in particular this column, the Killam column. Dr. Milichewski and I talked about it, and I think I talked to Carla about it a little bit as well in her role in the Killam School Building Committee. It was bothering me that we didn't have a goal for Killam because it's so important. But at the same time, it's such a joint goal, I know why we don't have it, right? So one of the things we talked about is, well, maybe we can make that a focus indicator, and that's why we added this column here, in which case it would focus primarily on environment and fiscal systems. But as I started thinking about it more, it's a huge family and community engagement process, a sharing of responsibility, a communication process, the whole thing. So it kind of covers the whole gamut. You look at some of the rest of these, we are in his goals in one way, shape, or form, covering almost all of the things. So as I outlined in the memo, the updated DESI guidance in 2019 suggested you focus on 6 to 8 indicators. Last year we had 9. Historically, prior to 2019, even in 2019 and 2020, Dr. Doherty's last year, we've done all 20 that are in there. So I wanted the committee to discuss how much we felt like we should do all 20, whether we should do 6 or 8, whether we should meet somewhere in the middle at 12 or 14, and if so, how do we minimize them or not? Enough of my little intro, and I'm looking for feedback here as a committee to figure out what we want to do. Dr. Milczewski, if you want to start, you can certainly start that as well.
I have no, honestly, I have no preference. I think that the committee will do a good job of the evaluation regardless of how many focus indicators. I think it's just your decision on how you want to evaluate. I have no preference at this point.
So,
Go ahead.
so right now, we're suggesting 6, you said?
Well, the DESI guidance for doing superintendent administrative reviews is to choose 6 to 8 focus indicators.
Right.
And the idea being, those are the things that are the most important that he or they should focus on in that review cycle as a measurement of the most important things. However, if you look at what we have here, with our goals that we've set up, they're pretty much covering everything except for cultural proficiency, which arguably it should cover in some way, shape, or form somewhere, right? So we could either pick the ones that have the highest counts, or we could say, you know what, they're really all there, and this is 2 years of review we're doing, so if you do 6 of 8, 8 and 8, that's 16, so we're almost to 20 anyway. Or we could do some sort of weighted factor that says the ones that have the highest counts, we're going to weight, 2 times, and everything else is weighted 1 time, which is another option they provided in that document as well. So I just want us to have that conversation so that when we go into the review in, a little less than 2 years, people know how many of these things they're rating, and if necessary, how much they're weighting them. And if we come out with an agreement from tonight, I can then go take this and put it into the template so it's ready for, 18 months from now, whatever the case may be. So, Carla.
The recommendation from DESI for 6, wasn't that from a superintendent, like, early on? Because with Dr. Doherty, didn't we do all of these?
We did. I mean, so this was first a conversation in, I think, John's last year, or the second to last year, because it had just changed at that point in time. And as the committee at the time, we didn't agree to do just 6 or 8, because we felt like, as a 10-year superintendent,
Should do them all.
he's done it all, and he's responsible for it all, so we need to make sure we, assess him at all. In this case, we started Dr. Milczewski with, I think it was 8 the first year. And that was fair because he's getting started, he's getting himself focused, right? Last year we upped it, and I think it was 9 last year, after some debate and discussion. Now, so he's gone through 2 full years, he's received exceptional reviews in both 2 full years. Part of that because of the focus, and that's the only things we scored. So do we say, okay, now, just as Dr. Milczewski is raising the bar on the principals and the staff, that we're increasing rigor and things like that, do we do the same with him and say, we expect you to do all of this as a superintendent? That's where my head is. I'm just going to say that. That's where my head is. And Tom and I have talked about that. Part of it for me is that, yeah, he's doing the whole kit and caboodle. He will have been through 4 years now. This is now, for lack of a better way to say it, his district.
Yeah.
Right? So my head is everything, but I wanted this committee to have the conversation and disagree with me if necessary, or agree, so we can move forward and be what it is. Go ahead.
So I'll say from the outset, I don't have a strong opinion because I could see how this could go both ways. I will say, I think that these are very comprehensive, ambitious goals. So no matter how many focus indicators we choose, we're evaluating him on these very comprehensive, focused, ambitious goals. And also, I didn't necessarily see it that because we chose to do this on a 2-year cycle, that means we should double the focus indicators or double the number of goals. So I don't reason it that way. I also feel very strongly that there's no way, whether we pick 6 or 16, that you're ignoring the other 14 or 4, that you're saying, well, those aren't my responsibility. That's not you. That's not the administration. That's not your team. It's not how you operate. So I also don't feel that just because we're not saying like we're commenting on this specific indicator in this evaluation, that that's not being talked about, that that's not being worked on. I see why you want it remarked upon, but I don't feel strongly that we have to do all of them, but if the group does, then I could get behind that too.
Any thoughts?
In full confession, I guess I probably go outside the lines when I do my evaluation anyway, because I ended up, I think, commenting on things that weren't things that I was supposed to, but, good things were done, so.
Yeah, none of this prevents us from commenting
yeah.
on anything, right? This is all just a
Just
matter of what
putting
goes
a
into the
grade,
score, right? And ultimately, that's what matters, is what goes into the score. We always, and we can and should always comment on anything that's happening. And to Erin's point, all the goals are going to be a huge commentary section. There's a lot there. But these, if you remember the rating process, these add up to the rating for each category. That adds up to the top, which adds up to the overall rating and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's just a matter of frankly, how thorough we want to be in the scoring process, more than. And maybe I mischaracterized what I was saying, more than what Tom will focus or not focus on, because like your point is, Erin, all of this is important, right? It's a question of how thorough we want to be. Carla, do you have any thoughts, or?
Your total there is 20, is that right?
20.
This is 6, 10, it's 21, yeah,
21.
something like that,
21.
21.
So in our packet, it's 12, and now it's gone to 21, but this is more than 12 here. Yeah, it's
So
added wrong.
these numbers moved because of Killam.
Yeah,
Killam being environment, fiscal systems, that's 5 more of them right there.
to me, Killam is Killam, and we've talked about it, Killam is a tough one because it's so collaborative. It's not something that just sits with him. If it fails, we all fail. If it succeeds, we all succeed. I almost feel like taking Killam out of the mix for that, but I understand the importance. It seems to me it's like almost on a separate track. That's how I view that. I don't necessarily feel strongly that we have to go up to, double our amount of indicators that we're reviewing against, because I feel the same, that we're going to review him against certain criterion, but he's going to achieve in other areas too. He's not going to fall short in those areas. I don't feel strongly one way or another, but if you asked me to make a decision right now, I would probably go for less indicators.
So if we go back to what's in the packet, let me change my share.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at here.
So the Killam ad was the result of the conversation that Tom and I had about whether or not Killam should be a goal or not. And ultimately, I think we agreed it probably can't be, but it could be covered in focus indicator conversation. That's why it was added and why that changed. Let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit so it's easier to see. So these are the 12 that were in the original packet before Killam was added and before another topic I was looking at added. So what you have there would be 12, which 12 is more than 9. The other way you could look at it is say everything with a score more than 1, in which case you get down to 8.
Good.
Go ahead, Chuck.
So I can see both reasons why or why not put Killam in there. I guess, I would think that maybe as it gets further down the road, it's more important to have in there. So is there a way of adding that in year 2 or something? Or?
We're not going to do any of these ratings, really, with focus indicators, right? Our formative will be based on the goals, right? We write up stuff on formative based on goals, but the formatives never go to the detail of the standards and focus indicators. So we're not going to hit these until we hit June of 2025, which whether you and I are on the committee is another question at that point in time as well, right? But June of 2025 is when we hit these, and that's when, the committee as a whole will look at these and say, how is Dr. Milichewski doing on, instructional leadership curriculum, instructional leadership assessment, instructional leadership data-informed decision-making, right? You go down the list. Right? So we won't even, so could we add anything in the middle? Absolutely, we could always do that if we felt like we wanted to, but we won't have done any scoring of any until then. And, oh, by the way, we probably should have had a Killam vote by the time we've written these goals.
The other thing about Killam is, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Go ahead, it's just open, let's have that conversation.
Even if you didn't list it, in our narrative, we could refer back to, well, Dr. Milichewski in the community and engagement section did this with Killam, and so we could certainly hit on it without having it as a, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's the same argument, right? You can write commentary without having it as a focus indicator.
Right.
Which is fine.
But the commentary, commentary
Yep.
is as powerful, it can be as powerful in who's ever reading these.
It can be powerful in the reading. It does not impact at all the rating.
Yeah.
And the rating is what ultimately impacts everything. It's what his contract comes down to, it's what everything, right? The rating is what is the final straw. And again, I think we all think he's exceptional, right? We just extended him for 6 years, all this other kind of fun stuff. So this is not an attack in any way, shape, or form on Tom. It's just a matter of making sure that we are, from my perspective, as thorough as we should be, while adhering, we're trying to adhere to some of the DESE guidance in as much as possible. We may or may not agree to do that, or we can just say, hey, like Carla said, there's 12 in the packet, let's just agree on those 12. If that's what people want to do, that's fine with me too. Go ahead.
Just hearing the conversation too, it's interesting. I don't have a strong stance on this, but I was thinking the 12, if we go to 12, I'm like, which ones do we leave out? Well, we're leaving out fiscal systems. I mean, we know that we're at a time, we're entering negotiations where this is going to be at the core of our work in the next couple of years, is making, important decisions around financial management, fiscal systems. You're leaving out, communication with the community and family community engagement. You're leaving out, which, in a time where like cultural proficiency is really important at the core of a lot of the conversations you're hearing in just the ed sector. I just think I can see the argument for going to priority focus indicators, to going to 6 to 8 to really narrow what your district's trying to do. But as I see us laying it out here, there's so many different things happen in each of these buckets, it's probably harder to narrow down closer to 6 to 8. And I think if you're then going to 12, 13, I think some of the other ones you're leaving out are actually some pretty important ones. So hearing this conversation, it makes me feel like, especially if this is a two-year cycle, maybe it's best just to have the full profile of 21 indicators, and if people don't want to comment as detailed in each one, they don't have to. But at least in that circumstance, you feel like we've had everything in there. We're not leaving out one that may be central to a lot of things happening. I don't think there's any real drawback to doing that, outside of just work for.
I'm in agreement with that, but I don't know where the rest of the committee is.
Yeah, I guess I feel like 12 is the majority, so if we're gonna do 12, then let's just do all of, no, but you know what I mean? Like, if we're gonna do 6 to 9 and really focus it and really, hone in on the ones we're gonna rate him on, that's one thing, but by the time, I don't know, by the time you get to 12, just do 20.
but
And the additional 8 really just came because of the Killam thing, really.
Killam's a huge part of it, right?
Right.
Which we don't have a goal for, but it's a huge, huge initiative for us over the next 18 months. Collectively, not just him, but what I've said to Tom and what I've said, I think, to Carla as well is, that Killam is going to be a huge lift of political capital by all of us and by him, right, to get that done and make sure we can move that forward for this town and those students and that staff. So we shouldn't minimize it, which is why I was struggling so much with it not being a goal. But if we add it as part of this, I think we can cover it. So it seems to me like we're coalescing towards doing them all, based on the most recent conversation. Are they, before we make a motion, does anybody want to vehemently disagree with that, or? Okay, seeing none, you want to make the motion, or you want me to?
go ahead.
Okay, yeah, it's technically probably not a motion, but we can do it anyway, just so we record it. So I move that we include all 21 focus indicators in Dr. Milichewski's 2025 summative review.
Second.
Seconded by Chuck. Any further conversation? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? And it passed 4-0. Okay. So now we move on to the goals themselves. And let me just make sure that's right. I think that's right. Yes. Dr. Milichewski, do you want to introduce some of the changes?
Sure. Appreciate all the feedback, both of the meeting and then afterwards. So I just, in the packet, outlined 3 changes in content outside, and then that's in addition to just a bunch of small grammatical changes too. First one, I think, is pretty straightforward. It's under goal 1, which you see on the screen right now. I changed that, so it says by the end of 2023-2024 school year, with data provided the district in September 2024, meet 80%. That changed from 80% from 100% of DESE determined MCAS achievement growth targets at school and district levels. I think just looking at like a lot of districts and looking at our track record over the past couple of decades, I think 80% is a reasonable yet still lofty target. I feel like 100% on this. I haven't found any districts or many districts where they've every year hit 100% of the targets, and I think that just becomes a number that you're just trying to get because that's the highest number. I feel like if we get 80% of our targets hit next year, I think that's some good progress and momentum. So I'd prefer to make it a little bit more, I think, achievable while we're still shooting for 100. So that's one shift. Second, I'll go to the last shift because that's an easier one too. In goal 4, added key action related to developing our new assistant principals too. I think we've made a huge financial investment in this new role, and I think we've heard conversations from the committee of the need to really invest in their growth and development too. So developing a clear plan and strategy to do that. So we've changed a key action in there as well. So you'll see that language updated. The last one, which maybe has the most conversation tied to it, in goal 3, I added a key action and benchmark related to early literacy screening, and this was recommended by Tom following the meeting. So Tom and I have had a couple of conversations about this too. I think there's a pro and a con to doing this, and I can see both sides of it, and I'll share with the committee. I don't have a strong stance on this either. I'll give what I think is the way I lean, but I'm happy to go the other way too. So, and then I'm sure Tom can give the counter argument too. Do you want to pull that link? Do you have that language pulled up? So the key action reads, prioritize, empower, and support the creation of a centralized, documented, repeatable, and executed process for conducting early literacy screenings, including the post-sec screening, data-driven analysis, best practice research for instructional supports, and family communication for students that register at risk on the screener in alignment with a newly enacted regulation. So Tom and I went back and forth of just kind of saying, should this belong in my goal? Should this belong in a different place? First of all, I agree wholeheartedly that this needs to be a priority and a focus for our district. Obviously, have had a lot of conversation with Aaron Birchill, with Sarah Hardy about making sure that we're not only in compliance, but that we're doing this process really well. So I like the content of this. The reason why I kind of lean away at the end of the day from it being in my goal is that this is not something that I am driving in the same way I am a lot of this other work. I think that this is really sitting first with Aaron Birchill, with Sarah's support, and then obviously me supporting as well. I think that this gets to just like a different level of granularity than some of the other goals do too. I understand the counter argument, and which Tom will give in a minute too. That's why I don't have a strong stance, because I agree it needs to get done. I just think it makes more sense to pull it out of here and have the, make it very clear that there needs to be clear benchmarks during this year to show progress throughout the year, because again, the committee needs to know that we are actually making progress in this area too. But turn over to Tom to kind of maybe share another side or perspective on that, and then we can figure out what makes the most sense.
Sure, I mean, I think, he said, obviously, we debated this quite a few times.
We did.
When I drafted it, I purposely used the words that I felt were his responsibilities, right? Prioritizing, empowering, and supporting. Not doing, because he's not the doer of this, but prioritizing to make sure it's done appropriately in time, empowering them to get it done, and then supporting them with whatever is necessary to make sure it happens. This was a newly enacted regulation as of this past July 1st. And the particular change that was part of it was the communication to the families. As this committee knows, we have already been doing early literacy screenings for the last 2.5, 3 years. But this has not had, and there was a big pushback across the state that the families were never hearing the results. And that's not just Reading, that's just across the state. So, there actually was, the first draft of this regulation was much more aggressive than the final version. But it is what it is as it stands. And the other part of this, to me, is there's a financial element to this that's very important, that is the original reason why the Coordinated Dyslexia Law was signed in the first place. And it's something I feel like we still need to do better at. And that is, if a child shows up in the K-2 at-risk screener, there's a reason why they're showing up at risk. It doesn't mean they have dyslexia, but it means they're at risk for having it. And we need to have a better process internally of saying, how far do we go before we do the assessment, or encourage the family to request an assessment or anything else along those lines, so that if they do have dyslexia, we can catch it earlier, and in many cases remediate it, not in all cases. If it's double deficit, triple deficit, we can't remediate it necessarily all the way, but if we catch it early enough, we can remediate and get those students in the right place whereby they're not going to be on an IEP for their entire school career, and they'll be much happier and much more successful in their entire school career. So this is one, as I think most of the committee knows, is pretty near and dear to my heart, but it's one I think that we as a district have made great strides in, but we're not there yet. And that's why the words centralized, because it has to be consistent across all schools, because this is not just a Josh Wheaton thing, has to be documented so all the teachers and all the staff know what we need to do. It has to be repeatable, because we're doing it again and again and again, and we have to be able to execute it and whatnot. It has to be data-driven, which the reason why I put in this goal is this is the data-driven goal. You have to apply best practices for how we're going to remediate those children, which is also in this goal, which is number 6 in this goal. And then the overall regulation side of it, which is the family communication. Another part of this is something we've known is coming, and we need to move this ball forward. I want us to be, again, a leader and recognize this leader here, not a follower as much as possible. And that leadership starts at the top. So that's the essence of my my request for this change here. So. And then, of course, the benchmark is that we have a presentation on what that process is towards about the time it's going to be applied. It's actually a little late versus the time it's going to be applied for the students, but it gives them a chance to refresh it if necessary, make adjustments. Oh, this didn't work, so we can fix this or anything else as necessary. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any other thoughts. Chuck?
Just a question for Dr. Milichewski. So with your direct reports who will be doing this, and I like the way you worded it, that he's not doing it. Do you have a similar goal with them in, memorialized as well?
Yes, Tom and I talked about that too, that this is one of Aaron's goals and one of Sarah's goals as well, of just but different actions they're executing on that. But yes, that's one of each of their goals.
So, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So this really then, Tom Wise, becomes belt and suspenders here, or
Belt and suspenders is one way to put it. I mean, I think it's, like I said, I think it's, you establish the priority at the top and the priorities roll down, you know? Every time when I was, you know, when you're in industry, what are the goals and how does that goal roll down to the next person? It may be changing the action, it may be something else, but this is the top level goal and it moves down. Now, there's a lot more, I'm sure, that Sarah and Aaron and, you know, everybody else have than what's on Tom. So not everyone that's here is going to roll down to them, but even this whole goal is going to be a lot of time with Liam, right? You're working on the entire data structure and trying to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to store it. So this whole goal is not Tom doing it. He's not going to be the one writing the Python code to do something or creating the warehouse or any of that stuff. He'll probably do, because he does, read a lot of research and say, oh, what about this one? And let's try that one. But he's probably not the one creating the place in which it goes or anything else like that. So this whole goal is going to tie to other people's related actions, for lack of a better way to say it. And I'm just going to watch this closely, so go ahead.
Yeah.
So anybody, any other thoughts? Go ahead.
Carla looks like she wants to talk to you. I'm struggling with it. I completely understand the urgency and the importance of it. So I'm not, and I understand the way you tried to word it, but I struggle. I'm getting a lot of joiners.
Careful.
I struggle with feeling like it's like one step below you, 2 steps below you, 3, 4, 5 steps below you, versus, I don't know, it almost feels like it's more of a district goal, it's more of an, you know, elementary goal, and it,
Go ahead, we're good.
so I wonder if there's some things we could put in, you know, like putting, you know, requesting a presentation in December, you know, some accountability checkpoints for the school committee, but I don't feel it belongs in his goal, I guess is where I'm at.
Okay. Carla, you were going to say something?
I'm probably going to open up a can of worms here. This is heavily tied to budget, right? As all of this is uncovered, it could be a huge budget implication that we have to resolve, right? What happens if budget is keeping people from achieving that goal, which is not in their control as well?
This is not, this process here will not be anything involved with that. Arguably, if this process implemented properly, it will save us money.
I understand
Right.
that, but initially.
But the creation of this process is not going to cause a budget issue. This is a mandated, we have to have this process.
Right, the identification, right, the promulgating it out to the families, letting them know.
Yep.
Then we have to do something about it, right? We have to apply services, which I totally agree with you. It is the direction we need to go in. It's just one piece of it for me that I like the idea of having checkpoints throughout the year, and being on top of it, because it's important to all of us. I would like to see that built into our meeting schedules, to do something like that. For me, that resolves it to some extent, and it just, because it's constantly being brought up, it's giving it more of a focus too,
Okay, Chuck?
potentially as another.
And that is what one of the actions is.
So you can leave,
Yeah.
so can you leave the benchmark in there, but take the other narrative, what was that, what's that? the key action out. You know, so the benchmark will still happen.
All the other benchmark, we could, I mean, theoretically, nobody stops us from doing it, right? I mean, but all the other benchmarks tie to key actions, right? Key actions lead to a benchmark.
No, I
right?
understand that's what I'm saying. It would be different, but
Yep.
it gets us what we're looking for by having the benchmark.
Yeah, I mean, we like I said, we could do that. But that, and I have no problem with that or with Carla's approach, which is just take it out, but we want to put it on our agendas list, right? That certainly is doable, because if we present it, then it's happening anyway, right? You know, so that, if that's the case, that's the case. That's fine. I don't think it makes sense to have the benchmark without the key action, personally. We can just say, hey, we're going to schedule this, and whether it's December 14th or, you know, November 30th or whatever makes sense. The only reason I wanted it here is it puts a timeline, right? That otherwise we don't really have. We can say, oh, we think we're going to be ready by December 14th, but, you know, maybe it's actually now February 10th. And it's like, okay, come on. We've already gone through 2 extra months of when we should have had this communication anyway, so let's.
But when you have it as a benchmark, it puts more teeth in the fact that you're going to get a report on it. And
Yes, but then the benchmark again, without the, you know, action is, I'm okay either way. It just doesn't make any sense to me to have that benchmark without an action. I'd rather just remove them both and say we're just going to have meetings on the topic, which is fine. Go ahead, Erin.
I'm going to say something, and I don't want to offend anyone. By your own confession, you are extremely close to this.
Yeah, but not by family.
Right.
Yep.
But part of what I'm hearing is if we don't put it in writing, you don't trust that it's going to happen. And that, I don't feel that way. I feel that if we say we want a presentation by December 14th at the latest on the progress on this, that your team will make it happen. And that if we're saying, you know, this has to happen, you know this has to happen, it's already in their goals, it's already in the works.
Yep.
And we want regular updates on it because it's that important. I feel like that I don't know. So that's part of where I'm coming from, that I don't feel like it has to be there to ensure that it's going to happen. But maybe other people disagree, like it has to be in writing or it might not happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to navigate what I want to say as well for various different reasons. I think Tom knows what they are.
Yeah.
You know, if this committee thinks the best answer is not a goal, not to be included in the goals, but we want a presentation, everybody says we want a presentation because we need it, that's fine. I would just say it's either all there or it's none there. I don't think it makes sense to be partially there, right? And so if everybody here says, we want that presentation that's in benchmarks so that it happens, but, you know, we don't want the goal, we don't want the part of the key action, then let's take the benchmark out, but agree that there's going to be a presentation. To your point, right? If we say that's what we want, that's what we want. I don't think half and half makes sense.
Well, I only threw that out there
compromise,
as a
right?
compromise. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that at the end of the day, too, we all agree this needs to get done, right? So no one's arguing the content of it, right? And do I think we're going to do this really well? I do. Like, I think our team's focused on this. I think it's a priority. I think it'll get done. So I think we'd be excited to, like, show our progress. So it's just a matter of whether it's in the goal or not. So it's really not a huge, you know, decision point. Again, I think it just, given the granularity of the other goal, like how specific some of the other goals are, I don't think this fits. But we can commit to a series of presentations. I think we can follow up tonight and I can get an update, you know, from our team right away too, just like to map out the timeline of what we seem to do, just to kind of keep this up to speed. So I'm hearing like signals from not only you, Tom, but from the rest of the community of how important this is. And I hear that, and I think the community can hear that. And I think we will make sure that we respond with like an appropriate level of communication and, you know, thoroughness throughout the year on keeping you updated. And I do appreciate this being raised too, because I think this is, you said, like a very consequential thing for students and us doing this right. So I appreciate the conversation on this too. And I also So I think that would be like my recommendation, is that leaving tonight, it sounds like we're leaning in the direction of it not being in the goals. If we do that, we can put together a memo soon to send to the committee. We can give an update at the next school committee meeting. We can also set the timeline. If December 14th is too late, we can do it earlier, just updates of where we are too.
I think if December 14th works for you all, then I don't think we need to move it forward. Like, November 30th is going to be pretty heavy with Math Pathways, for
Yeah.
example, right? Already, we've committed to that. November 2nd is probably too early, because you will have not done anything from a execution of it to know that it works. That's why I originally put December 14th, or 15th, or 14th, or whatever it is. So if that works for you, then great. I really personally don't think we should have it much later than that. You're going to January, you're going into budget season. Sometimes our budget meetings are short enough that we could do it, but I don't really feel like we should squeeze anything into those necessarily. So if that works, great. If it doesn't, then I guess we can renegotiate a date that works for everybody. Okay. So we'll take out that, and as a result of that coming out, then 2D would also come out, but that's irrelevant because we've already agreed on the engineers.
I was like-
So,
And Tom,
matter, yep.
thank you for, always keeping this on the forefront and always making sure it's at the front of everybody's minds, because we all know how this whole goal, how it helps students and it's best for students, but then how it impacts our budget in a positive way and ultimately saves us money as a district, right? So right, it should, right?
Should.
It's a win-win, and just, we keep pushing it to the front of the line. I guess that's the important piece of it.
And this committee does a good job too of signaling urgency around things. Like we talked about literacy curriculum, we talked about like ALICE drills for elementary, things that have popped up over the years, and we can sense that this is while it may not be in writing too, we can sense when this is something that the committee really coalesces around being important too, so.
Okay. So I guess the motion would just say the goals absent the early literacy portion. Just keep it that way.
Okay.
Okay? We'll be clear when we know what we're doing in that space. So let's go ahead with the motion.
Motion to approve the superintendent's goals and focus indicators for 2023-25 minus the
Early literacy.
goal 3,
Just call it, just minus the early literacy.
minus the early literacy.
There you go. Seconded by Carla. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor? All opposed? And it passes 4-0. And for 2 weeks in a row, we'll be finishing before 9 o'clock. If anybody has one more motion for us.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Aaron,
Second.
seconded by Chuck. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you very much. We are hereby adjourned.